The story of Hogwarts Legacy has been revealed. It is around the time of the Goblin Rebellion of 1890. You play as a Hogwarts student in their 5th year who investigates and thwarts the actions of the goblins as they work with dark wizards to achieve their ends. Wait, the goblins are rebelling? I remember the off-the-cuff mentioning of goblin rebellions in the books, but they were never given the spotlight, just treated as boring window dressing as told by the droning ghost Professor Binns. I approach all the topics on my channel from a narrative, world building, and historical perspectives, because those are my areas of expertise. When I notice a massive narrative choice like dragging what was once some offhand world building detail to the forefront, I'm interested in examining the implications of that. Turning the spotlight on these rebellions opens up numerous world-building questions that I do not have the confidence that the world of Harry Potter can withstand. Obviously, the game hasn't been released yet, and we don't know how Hogwarts Legacy will be approaching the narrative. But with the core enemies being goblins and other dark wizards, it is heavily implied that the goblins will be portrayed unequivocally as the bad guys. There is potential that the game will complicate this narrative to the point where it's an interesting exploration of non-magical races in the world, and not really a tone-deaf choice. But given the paper-thin world building surrounding Harry Potter and its notorious author, I'm not holding out too much hope. Before we get too far into this, I want to preface that I'm not suggesting that having evil characters, even evil main characters, means the creators share those characters' views. Including topics like racism and classism in your world can allow you to critically examine those things. What doesn't work is when you put those things in your world and leave them there like window dressing, allowing the hero to remain a hero even if they uncritically participate in maintaining the status quo. This is my biggest fear for Hogwarts Legacy, that they'll make the goblins into some mustache-twirling villains, ignoring the valid societal concerns that may lead less nefarious goblins to follow a villainous one, and hand-wave away the problems still facing goblins when the hero finally defeats that one bad apple. If you're coming from a Lord of the Rings, Dungeons & Dragons, or folklore perspective, you might ask, wait, what's wrong with killing goblins? Aren't they pretty much fair game in fantasy works? I would challenge that idea, even in those stories and mediums, as painting entire races with one broad brush is first a bad narrative choice, and second, it makes the world far less interesting and dynamic. You can have a group of evil goblins, even a kingdom of evil goblins, but suggesting that all goblins are, by their very nature, evil is a kind of bioessentialism or othering that can create poor narratives, because it ignores any societal, cultural, or socioeconomic reasons for their actions, and instead takes the lazy position of they are just naturally evil. All that aside here, because in the text of the books and films, goblins are not evil. They are everyday normal citizens of the wizarding world. They work in banks and do paperwork. They are trusted by and contribute to their community. Though the books paint goblins as selfish, and there is a troubling comparison to be made with how the author portrays them as a sort of Jewish stand-in, they are inarguably sapient lawful citizens, and definitely not evil as a whole. You can tell a lot more about a group's place in society by looking at the conflicts that have surrounded them. Why, if the goblins are not inherently evil, as is the case in most fantasy tropes, have they rebelled numerous times? We are given very limited information in the official sources as to the reasons for these rebellions, but the sources we do have paint a pretty clear picture of the sort of conditions that the goblins lived under that may have contributed to sparking off these rebellions. 1. The Wand Ban. In the books, we discovered that goblins have been denied the right to use wands. Here's a quote from Deathly Hallows between Griphook and Ron.
The right to carry a wand has long been contested between wizards and goblins.
But goblins can do magic without wands.
That is immaterial. Wizards refuse to share the secrets of wand lore with other magical beings. They deny us the possibility of extending our powers.
Here we see that the human-dominated government of the magical world prevents non-humans from accessing their magic. The argument that Ron makes, that goblins can do magic without wands, suggests that humans cannot. This is textually untrue. Not only has Harry done magic without a wand, it's the reason most children in this world need to go to a magical school. They all can do magic without a wand. It's the wand that allows them to control their magical ability, honing and amplifying it to make them more powerful. A wand, then, is the nozzle at the end of a hose, condensing a spray of magic into a more powerful stream. This technology gives them an advantage over the other magical races, and thus it is in the interest of maintaining their supremacy that witches and wizards do not want to share wands with the other races. In The Goblet of Fire, Ministry of Magic employee Amos Diggory details the wand ban, stating that no non-human creature is permitted to carry or use a wand. There are many other intelligent magical races in the Harry Potter universe, from giants to merfolk to centaurs to house elves to goblins. The blanket denial of any of them to use what is essentially standard issue to all magical humans is a pretty obvious example of societal oppression. 2. Harassment and implicit inequality and exclusion of non-wizards in wizard spaces. One thing you'll notice pretty quickly about Hogwarts is that all of the students are human. The wand ban may be the easiest thing to pin this on, but that doesn't make it any better for other magical races. Education is a huge pillar of the public services provided by a government, and exclusion of any people that it claims to govern is a massive injustice done upon them. It's possible that goblins and other races have their own schools, but the fact that the titular Hogwarts is devoid of them entirely means that education in the wizarding world is segregated by design. I think we can all look at our own history with segregating schools to understand the problem inherent here. Besides that, there are many isolated grievances that the goblin community has suffered over their history in wizarding society, like Wizard Yardley Platt, a goblin serial killer, said to have killed roughly 145 goblins before being caught. That's a ridiculous body count for someone to achieve when the investigators can use literal magic. That speaks to me of an unwillingness in the Aura's office to spend time investigating someone only targeting goblins. Another notable moment was the dunking of Urg the Unclean into a village pond by a group of young wizards. This precipitated the bloodiest goblin rebellion yet. This event we only know about from Ron complaining about the fourth-year History of Magic final, suggesting then that the version of events we know of comes directly from human wizard historians. It's unsurprising then that this event sounds comical, and hand-waves any legitimate concerns the goblins may have had in their governance, to instead make it sound like one stinky goblin was mad about a practical joke. It would behoove the publicly funded education at Hogwarts to not encourage critical thought about the state of affairs the non-human magical races have to suffer under the current status quo. 3. Lack of representation in government. My first thought that came to mind when I heard of a goblin rebellion was, wait, rebellion against what? I never saw the Ministry of Magic as a power equal to, say, a country's government, but I think that was a flaw in my understanding of what the Ministry actually is. No, they aren't a country's government, but they function almost identically. No, they don't have country borders, but they do have jurisdictions. The Ministry of Magic is a ubiquitous force that can be found in every country, governing and maintaining the secrecy of their society. They do this through traditional means. They regulate, legislate, judicate, and impose all the prior through force. If you step out of line, the Aurors, or wizard cops, will subdue you and bring you before the Wizengamot, the High Court and Parliament. Essentially, this body of wizards operated as both the legislative and judicial branch of the government of the Ministry. Should this court decide that you have fallen afoul of their laws, you can be punished with fates that ranged from a small fine to having a Dementor literally steal your soul, a barbaric practice that was still in use in the mid-90s, when the Harry Potter books take place. With this level of violence at their disposal, the Ministry of Magic is no collection of innocent bureaucrats. They are a harsh and brutal government that can and will issue ultimate punishment on anyone that runs afoul of the laws that they write. This isn't helped by the fact that there's not a single non-human amongst this legislature and highest court, but the court still can rule on cases that affect non-humans and write laws that control their lives. The way the Wizengamot members are selected isn't exactly clear in the source material, but whatever it is, the result is a complete lack of representation for any non-human magical race. With a ruling body having such complete control on the races over which it presides, free use of capital punishments, and offering no representation for any of the races besides humans, a rebellion would be obvious and inevitable. 4. The threat of falling down the social ladder. You can't examine the non-human races that make up wizarding society without examining the House Elves. This race of slaves makes up the grunt labor force that props up wizarding society. The race appears content with its place in society and actively fights against improvements to their lot on an individual level. The presence of Dobby in the books challenges this concept, but his desire to be free is treated as an anomaly. Hermione's desire to advocate for the House Elves is only ever treated as a joke. I think it unlikely that a race of beings evolved naturally to be subservient like the House Elves. They could come into being in one of two ways. First, they were created by wizards to serve them. This seems unlikely based on what we know of the rules of magic. Your mother can't produce food out of thin air. No one can. Food is the first of the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. Oh, speak English, can't you? It's impossible to make good food out of nothing. You can summon it if you know where it is, you can transform it, you can increase the quantity if you've already got some. This rule seems to suggest that magic cannot create something out of nothing. This means that in order to create something more than a facsimile of life, the house elves must have been a functioning group of magical beings before becoming enslaved by wizards. What they are in Harry Potter isn't what they always were. This was done to them. Whatever happened to make house elves into the subservient race they are now, the fear of suffering a similar fate would have to permeate all other magical races. The house elves are an ever-present reminder to the other magical races. Stray too far out of line, and this could be you. This fear of what wizards could do to them, should they choose to, must never be too far away from the consciousness of the goblins. And don't forget, goblins currently hold an important role in wizarding society. They run Gringotts Bank, a staple of the wizarding economy and a trusted pillar of the wizarding world. The goblins likely worked hard to establish themselves in such a high position, which means they would have a long way to fall should the wizards decide to unseat them from their place in their society. With all these things put together, it's obvious to any historian that a revolution would be inevitable. The wizarding world is unapologetically human supremacist and violently puts down anything that may challenge that status quo. This state of affairs could actually lead to an interesting and complex interrogation of a part of the wizarding world that was left mostly underexamined in the books and films. But do I think that's actually what's going to happen? No. I don't think that it's actually impossible that this game handles this topic well. If Hogwarts Legacy's approach to the goblins is from a perspective that considers that they may have valid concerns, or conversely allows the player to be a bad person and then calls attention to that, it may end up being a compelling story within the wizarding world. The gameplay trailer even shows the player character casting the Killing Curse, which suggests that the morality of the character we inhabit within the game may not be as clear-cut as previous Harry Potter games. The problem here is that I suspect that the final product won't cast a critical eye on the player for engaging in behavior that today we would see as objectionable, that of violently putting down a rebellion of the working lower social class. I fear, because of the non-human nature of the goblins, that their very valid concerns will be ignored, and any violent actions against them will be seen as justified. I think this bothers me so much because many of the goblins' concerns that I've listed before have direct or indirect parallels to revolutions that have occurred in our real world. Take the Haitian Revolution, one of the largest slave rebellions of all time, and maybe the best example of what we know as a race war. The Haitian Revolution was predicted long before it occurred by French thinkers due to the awful conditions and injustices both the black slaves and mixed-race social aspirants suffered on the island colony then known as Saint-Domingue. All of this was justified by the government writing laws based purely on race. It's unsurprising then that atrocities were meted back out to the white French colonists that seemed horrible to the people of the time, but were par for the course when comparing those atrocities to the standard everyday horrors inflicted on non-whites. It's a lot easier to commit atrocities and injustices to anyone outside the group one is a part of, which is why in order to commit those evils, it's important to set people apart with a process known as othering. It's a lot easier to murder, torture, and oppress people if you don't see them as people. In a game narrative, it's important to understand the role you are being asked to play. Are you the good guy, the bad guy, or something in between? Or are you being asked to choose? In any of those scenarios, it's very important for the game to communicate the consequences of the player's actions. For example, Spec Ops: The Line allows players to commit atrocities, but that's the whole point of the narrative. If Hogwarts Legacy has dramatic consequences for violently putting down a rebellion, it may end up telling a compelling story. But with the history of Harry Potter's paper-thin world building and the varying quality of video game writing in general, I'll be keeping a skeptical eye on this project going forward. Once this game comes out, I'd love to do a follow-up and see how they actually ended up tackling the issue of the goblins. If you want to see that and other content like this, please consider subscribing and sharing the video with others you think might enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Ben DeHart. See ya.